Hey guys, today we're going to be going over the interface of Fusion 360 so you guys know where to find all the tools we'll be talking about today. We'll also be going over sketches, which is all of our 2D creations, as well as creating, which is how you turn your 2D sketches into 3D objects, and then the modify section, which is how we'll be altering and changing all of our 3D models to make them a little bit more realistic. First off, let's take a look at everything in Fusion 360 that we can mess around with and all the little nooks and crannies of the software. So first off, your screen should look like this, a really large grid universe with a little cross right in the very middle. This is our origin. This is the center of the Fusion universe. We'll start off today by checking out the data panel. That is the 3x3 square button in the top left-hand corner. And this is where we can see all of our folders and files that you have, as well as all of the sample projects that are built into Fusion 360. Now, because Fusion is a cloud-based CAD program, all of your files are going to be saved to your cloud account. So as soon as you sign in on another computer, you'll then have access to all of your files, which is really nice. We'll close that down and check on our first area on our workspace. Now this section up here, this is called the browser. This is the place where all of your model's information, such as any of the 2D sketches that went into it, any of the bodies that make up this main file, as well as any canvases or image that you want to put onto your project. You'll also notice we have an area called document settings. If we expand this, we can actually change the units of our project. Now it's always going to default to be in inches because Autodesk is an American website, but if you click this little pop-up right next to it, you will open what's called a dialog box. This is a very popular place in Fusion 360's kind of logic or architecture, where instead of having all of these lists of buttons and things that you probably don't know what they do, it's saying, hey, ignore everything else in the software. Everything you want is in this little box. So for us, we can change around our unit type. I'm basically always working between inches and millimeters. If I'm working on a 3D printing project, I'm always going to be designing in millimeters because everything about 3D printers is always going to be in millimeters. I'm going to go ahead and click Set as Default because that's the most common unit that people do CAD in, and then click OK. So now any projects that I'm working on, instead of defining the size of something as 2 millimeters, for example, I can just say 2 and the program already knows what units I'm in. Just below the document settings, we have our origin. Now you'll notice to the left of it, we have this little eyeball, but unfortunately it's grayed out. Anytime you see a grayed out eyeball icon, it just means that it is hiding it. So to show our origin and all of our planes, I'm just going to be clicking on it, and this will pop up all of our planes, axes, and origins in the middle of our workspace. Now these planes are where we're going to be drawing all of our 2D sketches. We've got the front plane, the right plane, and the top plane. If I'm designing something as if I'm drawing it on a paper that's on a table and I'm actually got a head-down view on it, then it may make a little bit more sense to then design it on the top. And we'll be going over all of the logic about which plane to use as we go into the rest of our projects. Now our browser is looking pretty empty right now because we haven't actually made anything. So as we start to build up more and more projects, this will get populated with more information that we can then kind of play around with and check out. Another thing that is quite empty right now is in the bottom left corner is our timeline. Our timeline down here is this gray strip that runs all the way down the length of our screen, and this will catalog and organize all of the features or steps that go into making a project. For example, if I'm making a square and then bringing that up into a cube, then I would have two features, the original sketch and then the extrusion. If you go up to the top left of our screen, you'll see we have this little gray box with design in it. Now design, as in computer-aided design, is where we'll be spending the majority of our time. This is the entire design workspace. This is where we'll be getting most comfortable throughout this program. But within Fusion 360, as the name implies, it is a fusion of lots of different types of programs. So if we click this, we can check out some of the other different things that we can play around with in this program. If you go all the way to the bottom, we can do drawing, which is where we'll be making different blueprints. Up next, we will have our manufacturing, which is where you can do all of your CNC work. You can also run simulations like drop tests or thermal loads of any projects that may need to go through product development cycle. We've also got the animation where we can make exploded diagrams. We'll be touching on that in this course actually. We'll also be going over rendering, where you can make photorealistic pictures of any of your designs. There is also the ability to make generative design, which is kind of on the forefront of engineering. We won't be touching on it in this course because it's a little outside the scope of basics, but is a very, very exciting part of what makes Fusion 360 just so awesome. At the bottom middle of our screen, we also have our navigation bar. This is where we'll be playing around with all of our tools, but generally all of this, like zooming in and panning around, this is stuff where it's going to be more of a pain if you use these buttons. And I'm really going to try and encourage you guys to get onto these shortcuts as fast as possible. For example, we can do a thing called orbiting. If you click on this button, you can then click and drag your screen around, and just like the name implies, orbit around your piece. So you can look at the underside, the front, the back, any which way you would like. And then to get rid of that, I'm just going to click escape. Now the shortcut for this operation will require you to hold down Shift and hold down your scroll wheel. Actually click it, hold it down, and then move around your mouse. This is going to be able to do what's called a free orbit around our origin. The other tool for orbiting around our model will be using the Viewcube in the top right-hand corner. This is a tool where you can click and drag and actually see all of the different sides of our project. But it also allows us to click on any of these faces, on the front plane for example, so we can get a front view of our project. It will also allow us to get a much more useful three-dimensional view of our project. If I move my cursor up to it slowly, you can see this little house icon pops up. And when we click this, it gives us what's called an isometric view, kind of a diagonal view of our project. So anytime I'm working in the 2D world, I actually do want to have a 2D view of what I'm working on. But as soon as I exit that plane and I actually want to turn it from a 2D sketch into a 3D object, then that's when I'm always going to have a three-dimensional view. At the top of the screen, we have our toolbar with all of our CAD tools, and you'll notice that mine looks slightly different to what you have on your screen. That's because I've customized my toolbar based on all of the tools that I use most often, but we'll be getting into a little bit how to customize yours so you can maximize your efficiency. So to start off, let's make a 2D sketch. So I'm going to go into my Create window, and I'm going to be clicking on Create Sketch. This is also going to be in your toolbar. This is the tool with the little green plus mark. And as soon as it does this, it opens up our origin and it's saying, okay, well, which plane would you like to work on? We're going to be working on the top plane today, so click on the plane that intersects with the green and red axis. You can verify that you're in the right workspace by going up to the Viewcube and seeing the word top. You'll also notice that we've got a brand new set of tools in our toolbar up here. We still have the Create and Modify, but now Create is going to be about making all of our 2D shapes like rectangles, squares, circles, text, all of that good stuff. And then Modifying is going to be about changing them slightly. For example, I would go into Create to make a rectangle, but then if I wanted to round off the corners, I could add what's called a fillet. That would be under the Modify section. We'll start off today by making a rectangle, so I can do this in a couple different ways. I can go into Create, Rectangle, and then 2-point rectangle, but you'll notice right next to it there is a letter. That is a keyboard shortcut. So every single time I'm making a square or a rectangle, I don't want to have to do that every single time. So instead of that, go ahead and click R on your keyboard, and this will open up a little rectangle tool right next to your cursor. Now to make this 2-point rectangle, I'm going to go ahead and move to the origin in the center, click it once, pull my cursor up and to the right, and then click again. And because I don't want to place another rectangle, I'm going to click Escape. The Escape button is your best friend in this program. Now you'll notice that this rectangle has got kind of a sky blue color in the very middle. That just means that it's an enclosed shape. If I was to delete any one of these lines, then it wouldn't be an enclosed shape and it would be completely white on the inside, just like the background. You'll also notice that we've got 2 blue lines over here and then 2 black lines over here. Now the difference is some of our lines are defined and some of them are undefined. In the world of CAD, saying that something is defined means that its location and dimension are completely known. For example, if my blue line is movable and I can change its size and location, then it means it is undefined. That's not a good thing. In Fusion 360, anytime I'm making a sketch, I am not done until all of my lines are black. That's what we're always going for. Now these lines are black, their end pieces aren't, which means that we can change their length, but the actual line itself is locked in the right location. So that's why they are black. Now the other thing I'm going to do is put a little circle in the middle. So again, you can go into Create, Circle, and then Center Diameter Circle, or you can just click C. So I'm going to go C, and you can see I've got my little circle icon. I'm going to click somewhere in the middle of my rectangle, pull my cursor away, and then click again. And because I don't want to make another circle, I'm going to click Escape. Now the first goal today is to set the center of our circle onto the top right-hand corner of our rectangle. And to do that, I'm going to be using a constraint. And the constraints can be found in this toolbar right here. These are tools that allow us to limit the movement of our sketches so we don't have to use as many dimensions. Now because I want 2 points to share the same location, I'm going to be going on and using the coincident tool. Co meaning 2 and incident meaning 1 location. It's where the word coincidence comes from. So I'm going to be clicking on this tool. You can see it highlights in blue. I will then be clicking the center of the circle and then clicking the top corner. Now if I hit Escape, you can see that I can still change around the diameter of my circle, and I can still change around the location of this, which means still nothing about this is defined and it is still classified as being undefined. Now to fix our sketch being undefined, we can always add in some sketch dimensions. So I'm going to be expanding the Create pull down, and then at the very bottom of the list we can find our sketch dimensions. And as you see, there's the letter D right next to it, which means it is a shortcut. So I'm going to type D on my keyboard, and I'm going to be making this a 25 by 50 millimeter rectangle with a 10 millimeter diameter circle. To add a dimension, I'm going to move my cursor to the top horizontal line until it's highlighted in blue. I'm going to be clicking it, moving my cursor away, clicking again, typing in 25, and then enter. And as soon as I do this, you can see our scale has shifted and the width of our rectangle is now 25 millimeters. With my dimension tool still on my cursor, I'm going to be making this 50 millimeters tall. So let's click this left vertical line, move our cursor over, click again, type 50, and then enter. Zoom out a little bit, reposition it. And again, we're going to be making this a 10 millimeter circle. So let's click it, move our cursor out, click it again, type in 10, and then enter. Now the other thing I want to do to this rectangle is add on some rounded corners. So that means I'm changing something about a 2D sketch that I already have, which would mean it's going to be in the Modify section. So go ahead and click on the Fillet tool, and then click on the top left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner of our fillet. I'm going to type in 5 and then enter, and that's going to give it a 5 millimeter radius corner to our rectangle. Now this word fillet is used for a rounded corner all over in manufacturing, except for woodworking. In woodworking we call it a roundover, but it is the exact same thing for a 2D and a 3D feature. Now if you accidentally typed in a wrong number for any of these dimensions, you can always double click these, type in a different number, let's say 35 for the height now, hit enter, and now all of our sketch dimensions have been shifted downwards. Now one of the fun things that you can do in Fusion 360 is that if you know there's a certain ratio or mathematical relationship between two dimensions, then you can actually put that into the math right here. For example, if you always know that your width is going to be double the value of your height, then you can say, take my height and multiply it by 2, and now if you change the height, then the width will automatically adjust. So for example, I'm going to make this to be 35 by 70 millimeters rectangle. So I'm going to double click on the 25 as if I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to be clicking the number 35 over here. This will say D2 because this was the second dimension that I wrote, and I'm going to type in times by 2 and then hit enter. And you'll see that it is now automatically gone to be 70 millimeters, but you'll see it says fx right next to it. This is a function, which is a mathematical relationship. So it means if I change anything about this, if I change this to 25 and hit enter, then this is automatically adjusted to be 50 millimeters. Now that we have our sketch good and done, I'm going to close out of it by clicking this green check mark in the top right hand corner called Finish Sketch. This means I'm done with the 2D workspace and now I'm going to do a 3D operation. Like I said, it's always good practice to get a 3-dimensional view of your sketch. So go ahead and move your cursor to the Viewcube and then click on that house icon. And this will give you an isometric view of your sketch. One of the most common CAD operations that you'll do is something called extruding. This is where you can take a 2D profile and then bring it up into the 3D world. We can do this by going into our Create pull down. This is now the 3D Create pull down, and find Extrude near the top of the list. Or you can type in E. Now we've got a little dialog box right here. We can click and drag that over there. And this looks a little bit more complicated than you may have just thought, because there's a lot of really good functionality inside this simple tool. Right now it's highlighted in blue, which means it's saying, hey, select your profile. So I'm going to be clicking on this main body that we made right here. And when I do this, you can see there's a little blue arrow, there's a little ring icon, a little box right here where I can enter in any values, and then a couple extra tools on the side here. But let's start off on this blue arrow. If I click and drag this upwards, I can actually make this whatever size I want. If I click and drag on this ring icon, then I can actually taper it inwards whatever degree I want. And you'll notice that when I move this in our dialog box, the taper angle is actually changing automatically as well. I'm going to leave this at 0 degrees, and I really only want to adjust the distance because we're going to be extruding this up 20 millimeters. Then we can click OK. One thing you do want to notice is now that we've actually created something, we can go into our browser and you can see we have our bodies and our sketches. We only have one 3D object, so we only have one body, and we also have a sketch right here. And you can see that our body is turned on, but our sketch is turned off. So if I want to take a look at our sketch, we can always just click this eyeball icon and you can see our sketch is right underneath it. If I wanted to, for whatever reason, you can always click the little eye icon next to your body and it makes it completely disappear. Don't worry, it still exists because you can always click the eye icon and bring it back. In addition to the browser, we also have some good stuff in the timeline as well. So at the bottom, we've got our sketch and our extrusion. And if you ever want to go back and edit any of these, you can always just double click it. So we made this 20 millimeters tall, but if you wanted to make it 25, 50, 100, it doesn't matter. You can always double click this feature and it will bring you back in time to that place. This is why the timeline is so cool. You can literally roll back the clock and inspect any feature throughout the entire creation of your project. Now there's lots of really important tools inside the Create pull down, so we're going to make a few more examples just to show you what's available. So I'm going to be making all of our future projects in a new tab. So I'm going to go up to the very top where there's a little plus sign where it says New Design, and I can click this and now I've got a new tab. Our old project is still there, but you can kind of treat it like different tabs on your web browser. Now the next tool that we'll show off is a tool called Revolve. So expand your Create menu, go into Revolve, and if you hold your cursor over there, it'll give you this really nice little preview. Now a revolve will essentially take a profile that you've sketched and rotate it around a central axis, which will give you a rotationally symmetric part. Before we use that tool, we do need to make the 2D sketch. So let's go ahead and go into our Create menu and make a new sketch, this time on the front plane that intersects with the blue and red axis. Now I'm going to click C on my keyboard, and I'm going to be clicking somewhere to the right of the origin, clicking once, pulling my cursor away, and then clicking again, and then hitting Escape because I no longer need the circle tool. Now for this example, we're going to be making something called a torus. That's the mathematical name for a donut or a bagel, but this is a really good example where we can take a circular profile and then swing it around a central axis and then make a 3D object very, very simply. We'll start off by dimensioning its diameter. So I'm going to click D on my keyboard. I'm going to click the circumference of the circle, pull my cursor away, click again, type 50, and then enter. I'm going to hit Escape to get rid of our dimension tool, and now I'm going to use my horizontal and vertical constraint, because right now the center of my circle can move up, down, left, right, anywhere it wants. And I want to limit that so it can only move horizontally to the origin. So I'm going to click our horizontal vertical constraint. This is the first one in the list. I'm then going to click the origin and then the center of our circle and then hit Escape. Now you can see that if I try and click and drag the circle, I can only move it left or right. I can't move it up or down. This is a constraint where I'm not using any dimensional values, but I am limiting the movement or location of my sketch. Now I can dimension the distance from the origin to the center of the circle by clicking D, clicking the origin, clicking the center of the circle, moving my cursor upwards, clicking again, typing in 60, and then enter. Now you can see my circle is completely black, which means it is fully defined. I can also verify that everything is defined by going into my browser and clicking the little arrow next to it. And you can see next to Sketch 1, I've got this little red padlock, meaning that everything is locked down and secure. Now I do need to make a central axis for my circle to revolve around. And I can do this by making a line that starts from the origin and goes upwards. Now I can go into the Create menu and click Line, or you can see I can type L. Either one works. But I'm going to be clicking on the origin once, moving my cursor upwards, and then clicking again. And because it's saying, hey, do you want to continue on? Do you want to make more and more lines? No. So I'm going to click Escape. Now that we're done with our sketch, we're going to go up and click Finish Sketch in the top right-hand corner. This will give us an isometric view of our circle and our line. And this is where we can expand the Create menu, go into Revolve, and it's giving us a little pop-up and it's saying, I need two bits of information. What is the profile and what is the axis? Now it can see, hey, I only have one profile. I'm just working with one circle. So it's actually done the bit for us. It said, hey, there's one selected. Now what axis do you want? And I'm gonna click this line we made over here. And as soon as I do this, boom, it makes a donut. How cool is that? Now it's always gonna default to a 360-degree donut, but if you want to, you can always maneuver this so you can take a bite out of that donut. The next Create project that we're gonna do is gonna be using the Lofting tool. This allows us to actually merge two different profiles that are laid on top of each other. So they're actually morphing shapes as they rise in the Z dimension. So I'm gonna make a new workspace by, again, clicking the plus symbol. And then I'm gonna be making a new sketch on the top plane. For this project, we're going to be merging between a hexagon all the way up to a circle. So let's start off by making that hexagon. So I'm going to go into the Create pull down, look for polygon, and then circumscribed polygon. I'm going to click that, click on our origin, and then pull my cursor away. Now it's automatically going to be set to 6 sides, meaning a hexagon, so I actually don't need to change anything at all. So I'm just going to click and then hit Escape. I can dimension this polygon, again, by clicking D for dimension, and I can click one flat side and then another, and then moving my cursor upwards, and this wants to be 50 millimeters. Now you'll notice that my polygon is still blue, which means it's still undefined, and that's because even though the center is fully locked down and the scale is fully locked down, it can still rotate all the way around. So I can fix this by adding in a horizontal vertical constraint to any one of these walls. Let's click on this one, and you can see it makes it fully vertical and fully defined. Now this sketch is all done, so I can just say Finish Sketch. But now I need to make a second sketch that's actually floating above it. Now the only sketches that we've done have been on the front and top plane. You could also make it on the right, but that's kind of limiting. What happens if I want to make a sketch parallel to one beneath it? Well, that's where we're going to be going into the Construct menu. And we're going to be clicking on this top one. This is the offset plane. When I click this, it's going to be bringing up all of our normal 3 planes to work on. I want something above our top plane, so I need to click our top plane, and it's saying, okay, cool, well, how far up? Well, I want this to be 60 millimeters, and I can click OK. Now I've got this kind of floating orange square. This is our plane. If we orbit around, you can see that it is floating right above our hexagon. So let's go ahead and make a new sketch, but instead of clicking on any of these 3, I'm going to click on this one up here. And this will still give us that top-down view, even though we aren't working on the top plane. But I want to make a circle that's about the same size as our hexagon. So let's click C, click our origin, pull away. I can type in 50 and then hit Enter. Then I can click Finish Sketch. So to connect these 2 sketches into one complete body, we're going to go into the Create pull down, and then find Loft. And as you can see from the example where it shows a square merging into a circle, this is actually a tremendously difficult thing to actually produce. It's actually impossible to make with just traditional manufacturing machinery. You actually do need something like a CNC machine where it can really precisely and accurately make this kind of funky shape. So let's click on this tool, and you see in this dialog box, it's actually way more confusing and busy than it actually needs to be. For us, we're only going to use the 2 profiles. First, I'm going to click on the circle, then I'm going to click on the hexagon, and this will merge the 2 shapes between. So at the very top, it starts as a circle, and then it will merge through into a hexagon at the bottom. I can click OK, and it will finalize our 2 sketches. Now, if we wanted to actually peer inside this body and actually see what it looks like layer by layer, we can go into our Inspect menu and click on this Section Analysis. This will basically be able to cut it in half and actually peer inside the model layer by layer. So I'm going to click this tool and then click on the top circle. And this is where I can click and drag this circle, and you can see that it starts to merge from this kind of perfect circle down to then a hexagon with rounded edges, and then they get sharper and sharper and sharper until it gets down to our bottom profile. For the final section of this class, we're going to go back to our original project, our kind of weird, funky cutout box shape, and now we're going to be introducing the modify tools. Now, anytime that you're working in CAD, you're always going to be going through a system where you start off with a 2D sketch in the sketch workspace. Then you're going to be merging from a 2D to a 3D object with all of our create tools. And then as soon as you have something 3D, you can change stuff about it using our modify tools. Now there's a bunch of ones in there, and we're going to be touching on the 3 that I use most often. Now we still have our very first sketch on the bottom of our project. We really don't need that anymore, so I can just go into my browser and then click the eyeball next to the sketch just to get rid of it. But the first thing we'll do is add on a fillet to this top edge. So the 2D fillet that we used, if we get a top-down view of our project, gave us these 2 rounded corners right there. That is a 2D fillet, but we can also do a 3D fillet as well. So if I get a 3-dimensional view of our project, go into Modify, and click Fillet, then I can actually click on this top edge and work my way around until all edges are fully highlighted. And then it can say, all right, what size of a fillet would you like? Let's give this a 2mm fillet. And when I click OK, you can see that I do have this radius that kind of wraps around my shape. If I get a perfectly side profile, it has a 2mm radius on all of the edges. And it will even follow internal corners as well as external corners. Now, another modify operation that we can do to the underside of this box is add what's called a chamfer. It works in a very similar way to the fillet, where we are removing some material from an edge, but instead of adding a radius, I'm actually going to be cutting in kind of a 45-degree bevel. So let's go into Modify and then click Chamfer. And again, I do want to knock down all of the edges, but instead of having to go around and click on every single edge, I know that this bottom surface intersects with all those points. So I'm just going to click that entire surface and type in 2mm and click OK. And you can see that it's added this 45-degree angle bevel all the way around the entire edge. So instead of having to click in 3 different places, I've minimized the amount of work I've had to do massively by just selecting a single face. Now, in the manufacturing world, anytime I'm producing an object, whether it be wood, metal, plastic, anything like that, I never want to have sharp corners. It's kind of an engineering faux pas, and you always want to remove some material, either with a fillet or a chamfer, something just to knock down the edge. It's the reason that you never see things in real life with kind of sharp corners on it. One thing is kind of difficult to hold, it's kind of pokey, but also it acts as a stress riser or a stress concentration zone. That's the kind of engineering-y lingo where if something is going to break, that's where it's going to break. But if you round off the corners a little bit, then it means it can distribute that stress away. So as soon as you drop something on the corner, it will actually protect it. Now, the last modifier tool that we'll be using today is something known as Shell. Shell is a way where you can take a solid body and select a face and then turn this into an open container. So go into the Modify pull down and find Shell. And when we click on this and hover our mouse over our body, you can see the entire thing is highlighted. In this scenario, it's going to leave no open face, but actually make it just a hollow cube thing, prism, whatever you want to call this. But in our scenario, we actually want to have this top lid completely open. So I'm going to uncheck tangent faces. Then this will allow me to just click this top surface. Then it's saying, okay, what is your wall thickness? Let's make this a 2 mm. And when I click OK, you can see that we've got an open container. This is a really handy tool. I use this all the time for making little organizational boxes anytime I'm 3D printing anything. But as you can see, it will map any outside features like this chamfer completely on the inside, so you get an even thickness all the way around.